Sometimes there are players who come into the Overwatch scene without any hype, shock everyone with great performances. Then we have others who have some sort of redemption and be a much better player than anyone anticipated after a poor showing or no showing at all. Today, we're going to look at a few players who fell into this category of unexpectedly shocking viewers. Checkmate joined Overwatch League back in 2021 as a DPS player for Florida Mayhem. People weren't really sure if he was ever going to play, considering how he's competing with Yaki for playtime, who was the main flex DPS on this team. Coming off of 2020, he was one of the best Tracer players and overall a great flex DPS. So Checkmate was probably going to come in specifically for Echo Tracer or something along those lines. But instead of coming in to play the role he was signed for like a normal person, he played tank, where the Checkmate Rhine was, funny. Of course, it made people turn their heads since it was disgusting, awful gameplay. All he did was just pin in and either hope he kills someone or his team wins the fight before they all die. Since he has zero tank experience at this level, what else can you really expect from him? Checkmate's not going to win against anyone in a mirror, and especially the fact that his first tank scuffle was against Fearless, so the odds were immediately stacked against him. But to give Florida some credit, this match actually went the distance. Not entirely sure how that happened, but it did. Apparently, the Checkmate suicide bomber playstyle nonsense was enough to throw Dallas off guard. Obviously, this was not going to last for a long period because the play was just so bad. After teams saw one match of it, they just knew what to expect. I guess all we can do is thank OG for this meme match since he decided to take a break halfway through the 2021 season. Other than this random stint, we started this season knowing nothing about Checkmate and ended the season still knowing nothing about Checkmate. There were rumblings of him supposedly being a good player, at least according to their GM, Albert. You can make of that what you will. I don't think the GM of a team will say his players are shit or talk down about them. We just didn't get to see this said talent for ourselves. When it came to this Florida team overall though, ending that season, them placing bottom 3 in North America is kind of sad considering the player quality, and their previous season where Mayhem placed top 4 with the same core roster is quite the drastic shift. Maybe fate just added that much to the team in 2020. I don't know. This whole roster was dropped, of course, starting a rebuild for 2022, and it was kind of shocking to see Checkmate return. If anything, you'd expect Yaki since he was a proven talent at this point in time, but Gunba saw what we all didn't in Checkmate apparently. 2022 was the foundation to get eyes on Checkmate. We were able to see how this whole time he was clearly a talented player, showcasing some highlights, mechanically good enough to compete with the better players while also being very flexible. Of course, he was not a proper Kevster type running lobbies down, just someone who could fit into a higher end roster perfectly, seeming to play anything you could ask of him at a high enough level to let a multitude of comps work, which inevitably became the strength of Florida Mayhem in the following season, where he would become a bigger part to that roster than most give him credit for. Fast forwarding to the main event year for Checkmate in 2023, we all know how this roster performed, that being as expected. Someone got MVP due to his flexibility as tank, and everyone else gets praised endlessly. Chorong being one of the best main supports in the world, Merit is a top tier hitscan player, but Checkmate always seems to go without this praise. People just say, yeah, he's a good player, and then stop talking about him, while overlooking how important Checkmate was to the overall success of this team. I'm just gonna add this in now, but I forgot to include RuPaul for that part, so oops. He's a good player too. Obviously, for Florida Mayhem, someone deserves the primary flexibility praise. Being able to counter swap on the fly as tank is much more difficult since you quite literally dictate the pace of the game for your team, while also being able to create plentiful amounts of strategies due to your ability to play any tank at a high level. But you also need a very flexible player to be alongside that said tank, which Checkmate falls into that category perfectly. I don't think there is a single hero he played throughout the season where you could say Checkmate just shouldn't be playing that. You want him on whatever other hero. Anything that was asked of him, he could play it to a really high level, and honestly could have gotten Role Star in 2023. I know I sure as shit never expected Checkmate to be this kind of player, and it reminds me a lot of Fleta. They are both very similar in the fact they're good at everything, but not the best at anything, and have that capability to pop off, and always had this praise of being very intelligent at the game. And also, both of them play tank and they both sucked at it, so there's that too. Whenever this Mayhem team went for a rush style, Checkmate pulled out Mei and he looked really good at that. If they wanted to play dive, his Tracer and Genji were both fantastic and able to compete with the best. And this same sentiment can stem to anything he needed to play throughout this entire season. Unexpectedly, he ended up being a DPS version of someone. Checkmate is not the best at anything, but good enough at everything. He fit alongside the most flexible tank seamlessly, allowing Florida to make it even easier to play their game. Now, this isn't to say Checkmate is the best player in the world. There are DPS players who are just better mechanically. Heesong, Stalk3r, Kevster, or Proper, just to name a few, but still adds a higher value than a lot of other players. I don't think a soul on this planet ever thought that Checkmate would become an Overwatch League champion. He was just a funny rectangle man who played for OG during lunchtime or whatever he was doing, benched by Yaki, when in reality, all along, they had this amazing diamond in the rough player and just never started him. As of me making this, Checkmate actually just joined Fnatic, which is a revamped Yeti roster in Korea for Overwatch Champion Series, Donghak and Attack for tanks. For DPS, there's Viper, Knife, and Checkmate. Kind of strange for them to sign another flex DPS. I'm assuming Knife will continue to be the hit scan player while Checkmate takes over the spot for Viper as a primary flex DPS, while Viper sits on the bench and probably only comes in for Echo Tracer. Then their backline is Izayaki and Lee Jae-gon. Known quantity, great to see them back again. Izayaki's probably the only person who can tame the Jae-gon beast, so I'm expecting great things. Hopefully Checkmate performs well on this roster since he showed a lot of promise to be explosive. I think that will be great alongside Knife, plus he has tons of flexibility that he showed on Florida. Shocking a lot of people, just an amazing player and a fantastic addition to Fnatic. Our next player could be surprising to some depending on which side of the fence you were on, especially considering how Stalk3r is viewed now. But going into 2023 Atlanta Reign, I wasn't really sure what to think. He of course played on Seoul Dynasty in 2022, actually being hyped up apparently. I never really heard anything about this. 2022 had so many players that everyone had their focus on, like Proper, Finn, American Tornado players, even Kellen for a little bit until we saw what happened to that amazing NYXL team. When ones like Alpha Yi and of course Stalk3r were put on the back burner due to NA being a much stronger region this time around, most didn't really pay much attention to the players in the East. Stalk3r had bits of playtime on Sojourn and other little pieces of Tracer during midseason, which did look quite good, but nothing really to gauge anything from. You need a lot more playtime to figure out the ceiling of the player. Summer Showdown was the only time Stalk3r was perma-starting, playing Genji. It was actually fantastic, looking to be one of the best Genjis around. His only competition was Who Are You, and obviously no matter what Stalk3r does, he can't win against that, but the only reason he was even playing in the first place is because Prophet was on Brig for that stage. Otherwise, I'm sure Prophet would have been on Genji there, where he still has no chance against Who Are You. Looking back, it makes sense to why people kind of forgot or just didn't know Stalk3r was supposed to be Jesus Christ 2 at the game, being benched practically all season long, and obviously people were more focused on Proper as a rookie and North American teams in general. Unfortunately, Stalk3r's talent just slipped under the radar, regardless if he had any hype behind him or not. He never really got to play very much outside of Sojourn or Genji. What can anyone really say about him after this season? So when Stalk3r joined Atlanta Reign alongside Lip in 2023, I was more cautiously optimistic than anything. People were going crazy, but Lip joining any team is going to be a big move in the offseason. Naturally, whoever surrounds him will be praised as well. Then after seeing Chio and Fielder join, the hype accelerated even more. I get he was hyped up going into 2022, a supposed prodigy player. We just didn't see anything on Seoul that was giving off how he will dominate his role. I've fallen into the hype for players previously, not fallen for that shit again. It needs to be seen before you can make an opinion. Remember how the American Tornado roster was the greatest team ever and would destroy Overwatch League once the squad gets together? What happened to that? Nothing but disappointment. But when we actually got to see Stalk3r play during the opening Sombra Tracer meta Atlanta Reign for So Hard, he was pretty good, just little stuff like looking to be the best Tracer in the world, that's all. The Lip Stalk3r Sombra Tracer play was disgusting, very akin to Lip Fleta on Shanghai during peak Fleta time, but probably better. Stalk3r was so dominant on Tracer, getting noticeably more value than everyone else, The best tracers you could ask for were in North America as well. Alpha Yi trying his best to carry that shit team. You had Proper, Kevster, Decay, Sugar Free, like actual insane tracer players. Stalk3r would just run them down in 1v1s, getting the most crucial sticks or kills, even just randomly killing the backline by himself. Stuff like this is why I hate how there was no public replay viewer. It would be great to actually watch all these POVs, even now. Going back and looking at these matches would be great, seeing how he played in a lot of these different situations, but sadly, we don't live in that world. Some people actually said Stalk3r was the Atlanta Reign MVP instead of Lip, which is reasonable to a degree. With what Stalk3r was doing, it's hard to argue with sometimes. Tracer as a hero is wildly competitive at this level. Doing what he was doing shouldn't have been happening. Regardless if someone was excited for him in 2023 or not, maybe they knew about his tales on Gen G having the possibility to start the Overwatch equivalent of the Rapture on Tracer. Whatever the hype levels may have been, I don't think a single person was going into 2023 assuming Stalk3r would be the best Tracer player in the world, and even throughout Overwatch history, his Tracer from 2023 can be up there with some of the most dominant Tracer performances of all time. He exceeded all hype anyone could have ever given him. The unfathomable level of impact just didn't stop. Every match, every day, Stalk3r was at the top of his game, and it makes sense to why he's a part of the elite gang of Team Falcons now. Most recently, when he pulled out Venture during the Major 1 finals, Stalk3r looked really good. He was one of the best of that tournament. Of course, he's basically the only person who played it, so it's easy to win when you're the only one, but he got a lot of value on the hero, and seeing Venture played at the professional level was nice. Team Falcons did a good job playing around it, and Stalk3r overall is just gross. I'm glad he truly proved himself on Atlanta Reign to be one of the best players in the world, and I'm sure he will be for years to come, assuming Champion Series will still be around. Our next player is probably the most shocking in recent memory, at least to me personally, since Hadi and his squad actually let me and plenty others down quite a bit during 2021. People were expecting a lot from the roster initially, most coming from British Hurricane, a team that was exceptional and EU contenders, just endlessly winning. So when 2021 Overwatch League began, no one had any idea how bad this team would be. Of course, it's important to mention how there is some sort of an excuse for them to be abhorrent. The Europe COVID lockdowns were in effect. No one could be in a facility together, and the only other team who was in a similar internal experience was the Paris Eternal, who was much better than London, of course, delivering a few upsets during the season. Any matches either team played was on a higher ping unless it was against each other, which is obviously not ideal. Situations like this can cause problems with certain players since everyone deals with their surroundings differently. Some people can still persevere in a bad environment, others just can't. An even more recent example would be Heesung and Junbin from 2023 Shock. They are currently looking to be the best in their respective roles, but on Shock, they were not very good. Some sort of positive environment is important for having a strong mental, building camaraderie between teammates, and just makes the whole experience more bearable. I'm guessing London is a group of guys that's reliant on having that strong bond between players and thriving in a positive landscape, and this 2021 season is the complete opposite of positive. There's no sense in ripping apart London Spitfire 2021. People being anticipated to see London Spitfire versus Vancouver Titans is all I need to say. Expected to be Toilet Bowl 2. To be as objective as possible with Hadi, individually he just wasn't very good. Looking very lost, playing a multitude of heroes like Ball, Rhine, Winston, not looking good at any of them, frankly. Hadi got dropped after this season, which was expected. Instead of the classic, the talent is there, it was, is there talent here? He was just viewed as a pretty bad main tank. He didn't look like he belonged in Overwatch League after this season. So when 2022 came around and then we saw Hadi get signed back to the London Spitfire shortly into the offseason, it created a lot of confusion because, you know, he wasn't good at all during 2021. It was just kind of weird, but maybe Chris saw his talent and wanted to give him another chance, or the Chris anti-Korean arc started and this was his only option of a tank to form his rebellion. This season, Hadi was expected to be dog shit. Obviously, you can't blame anyone for thinking that. London went right down to the bottom of power rankings, but shockingly, he came out the gate swinging. Quite literally, not beating any top tier teams like San Francisco Shock or Gladiators. but they were actually winning matches, most notably playing their Rhine comps, which ended up giving them a ton of fans who adored London Spitfire a lot. Hottie Rhine was looking to be the best around, a started from the bottom, now we're here, as some kid diddlers would say. When other teams mirrored the London style, it didn't work out for them, and Hottie was always individually better. The London teamwork was impeccable with how they executed team fights, and it's genuinely interesting viewing it. Similar to when Dallas Fuel played the Hivemind comps, everyone seemed to be on the same wavelength with how they positioned themselves and executed everything. A funny thing I noticed while looking back is when London started to beat the better teams, it made people really angry for some reason, saying London cheese comps were blasphemy, they don't deserve to win against these other teams. But when Dallas Fuel did the same thing in 2021, the sentiment was a lot different. It was, wow, this is so amazingly executed. It's great to see them dominating these teams. Like, what kind of double standard shit is that? Is the European hatred that extensive? Regardless, no one expected Hottie to even be good, let alone this team overall, where 2021's arguably worst main tank was the focal point of a team's success. Getting a few upsets throughout the season, always being the underdog team propelled them to play with a lot of confidence, since you have that what do we have to lose mentality. Spitfire having this individual style made them an interesting opponent for teams to go against as well. They were the only teams who played this way, and you could see their opposition struggling to deal with it at times. Those people are put in an uncomfortable position. Like, would you want to try to scrim London and waste a scrim block to learn a style only one team plays, or try and adapt mid-series to their bullshit? It wasn't just Rhine we got to see from Hottie. He played Junker Queen, Winston, even bringing out Ball from time to time, where seeing him as a functional tank and performing well enough on other heroes was really good for him. Redemptions like this are not common, and is quite inspiring to see the drive he had to persevere through his lows, experiencing what is quite literally the lowest of low anyone could have in their career. Putting it into perspective, London won 12 maps during 2021. That team was atrocious. And yes, of course I know this is a whole different team aside from Sparker and Hottie, but Hottie specifically in 2021 seemed to struggle quite a bit and suffered all of those losses. That can either break you, where a good example of that is Effect on 2018 Dallas Fuel, trying so hard to win on a team that's actually dog shit, he burned himself out completely from the game. Or it can give you an unbreakable mental, where you experience the bottom and you're able to handle whatever situations are thrown at you. And clearly that's the category Hottie fell into. I'm sure his 2021 season helped him quite a bit mentally when London was struggling, because it's not his first time losing a bunch. He also ended up becoming a very positive member for the community. Most people liked watching him play, aside from the ones who genuinely hated the Rhine cheese comps as they were coined. The positivity radiating around him probably elevated his performances to some degree, while also being able to play in a team house with his mates obviously helps too. 2023 for Hottie and London was almost the same, aside from London being shit at the Winston meta during the beginning. Not entirely sure what happened there, but they turned their season around later on, and it was one of the most impressive turnarounds of all time actually. They went from being a bottom team to a team that made playoffs, which is really impressive. Overall, Hottie is a very surprising tale. I never expected him to even come back to Overwatch League, let alone make playoffs twice. Those are a few players that were shocking to me, maybe not for you. If there's ones that shocked you a lot more, make sure to leave them in the comment section below. I'm curious to hear all the other ones that I probably forgot about and didn't mention here at all. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and also check out my video on another team from 2021 that is not the London Spitfire, but it is the worst team of all time, probably. If anything, it's up there at the very least.